Not again! This is the 4th time! What is this? Start. B5H, you're fired!
Okay, that's a horrible intro, but today is not about the silly B5LH meme which Buzz and Tooth kept on talking about and ending with them saying that it's fired. No, not at all. No, I'm serious. Today we are talking about this. That's right, I hate Boeing 747s. No lies, to my opinion, that is one of my favorite aircrafts ever. Because it's big and huge, because that's the only other word I can know about how huge that thing is. That's the second time I'm saying huge. That's the third time now. And it was the most luxurious and best accommodation aircraft in its time. However, there is one true reason. There is one true reason that I, for all of eternity, would never like the Boeing 747 so much. Air disasters. That's right. If you don't know, I searched on Google and it's smart enough to tell me that it has a total number of 61 of its units crash and burn into nothing. Everybody knows the disaster of Singapore Airlines Flight 6 TWA800, which is on our picture, and mainly, you guessed it, Japan Airlines 123. Of course, I'm not allowed to talk about it, but then this is a short video on a rant. Totally it's not a rant, but it's supposed to be a rant. First off, the number of deaths. Now, it's lucky that the total number of passengers on flight 123 from Japan Airlines, only 4 survive. Crazy, huh? But why do I don't like these air crashes that they cause? Because of how they destroy their own side of physics. Of course, they are flying way above of around more than 1,000 feet above where you are right now. They are still around today. However, due to those 61 crashes, Singapore Airlines and some other international airlines, they get rid of their all of their passenger Boeing 747s and swap them with freighters. That's right. Even though a freighter can still cause deaths, it is possible that it will be less. One day, 6 billion? No, less than 6 billion. Okay, enough with all of that shitpost. Okay, now back to this. Right here. Why did I put this up? Basically, a Boeing 747 in a crash will be like one of those bus enthusiasts saying that the B5LH is fired because of how silly it is. Of course, it doesn't look like those buses shaped like a peanut. No. But then they say it does due to the roof. And it's not a hybrid. I mean, it's not electric, it's hybrid. Now, back to the planes. I'm going to prove you by showing one of those top 10 lists. First up, how many searches would there be of videos saying top 10 crashes of the Boeing 747? That many! Look at it! There's one 5 months ago, 1 year ago, even 2 weeks ago. They still kept on going. There's the Air India one, there's the Pan Am and KLM, which is apparently my favorite though, because it's how cool is it though. But, oh, by the way, the reason why they didn't mention much about KLM is because the disaster is mainly focused on the Pan Am that crashed with the KLM on the runway. Look at it. There's a lot of videos, including Pan Am 103. Correct me in the comments what is called 103. Pan Am 103, or is it something else? I don't know. There's even other incidents regarding 747 crashes. But what about the A380? This is why I like the A380 more than the Boeing 747. If I go and search for top 10 crashes A380, you won't see anything regarding to the A380, because apart from Qantas 32, which has its second engine explode and ended up in flames, not so big, they were able to put it out when it happened, and everybody survived in the incident regarding Qantas 32, by the way, which left Singapore and came back because of the incident. As you can see here, I'll skip this.
It's 10:01 a.m. The pilots are just 4 minutes into the flight.
We're losing an engine.
So Qantas 32, as those aviation enthusiasts heard about the story. Yes, you probably have heard about the story. So basically, the second engine explodes, and they turn back for Singapore, which is Changi Airport. Due to the incident, everybody survived. The end. Happy ending. Wait, what? Well, what about Boeing? Okay, so there are some incidents that regards other Boeing aircraft, and sometimes even McDonnell Douglas, because at the time we do have those McDonnell. I'm not going to say anymore for now because I've lost my memory of pronouncing that aircraft company. Okay, enough with that. Let's look at a video, one of those top 10 videos of the Boeing 737. Let's start with the earliest post. Recent upload date today. Oh, okay. This month. There we go. starting off with TW800. Very, very horrifying incident, but then very interesting. There was, okay, let me pause it there. So what happened to TW800? I'm going to reverse back and slow down the playback speed. So what happened is that there is a few tank explosion. Not only that, after the explosion, a few seconds later, the whole nose fuselage cut off, clean off, and went down into the Atlantic Ocean, a few kilometers from New York, on its way to Paris. With the loss of the nose, the rest of the plane was left to fly in a random direction. As it falls back down into the sea, the wings, the tail, broke off. Liar! This is some mystery. I haven't seen this before. Whoever who saw this before, tell me in the comments on what is the story about this. However, we are going to find out though. Oh, I know this crash. So it's a airline, and the Boeing 747 went over it and misses to avoid a crash, and then somehow broke up. And then the more bigger plane that lost control due to the impact went into a ravine. The Boeing 747 ripped into pieces instead of Singapore. Anyway, number 8. I bet is a recognizable one. Yes, this is the 103 Delta. I'm not gonna talk about it. Terrorist bomb. There it goes. Rips into pieces and is going to fall down into a village-like town. This is a horrible crash. If you look at the air crash investigations animations, look, it turns into a fireball and falls straight into a town. Like that, just like a meteor or a small asteroid. And not only that, the town burst into flames due to that. National Airlines Flight 102. Oh, I know this. This is where the incident is caught on video. The plane, as it took off, it went too high vertical because the cargo slid to the back and then did that vertical thing. And then it caused it to stall, and then it falls straight down with that massive explosion. You can see how the animation did it. There it goes, and it lights down, and then bang, smashes into the ground. Number 6. Let's see. Oh, it's the Korean Air Flight 801. Okay, it's hard to find out what it is because I heard about 2. Has to be something else. Fire? I don't know. Ailerons have to be ailerons because we're having a close-up of those ailerons trying to, Or is it storm or fog? Yes, it's both. And it crashes in the middle of nowhere and then smashes. One weird thing is that there isn't an explosion yet. Anyway, number 5. Yes! One of the kings of deadliest Boeing 747's disasters. Flight 103. made by Japan Airlines. Yeah. So when I first heard about this incident on YouTube, so the timeline is, for no reason, the vertical stabilizer or the rudder broke off. The plane lost control, and then it crashes, and then it slices a ravine, some trees on a mountain, and then crashes in a ravine a few meters away. And it's from the series called Mayday, not Air Crash Investigation. Number 4. Oh, it's a cargo plane. I think I haven't heard of this incident before. I just don't know. As usual, a normal takeoff. Good thing it's carrying freight. And what's gonna happen? Fire? Oh no, look! Oh, nice! I shouldn't do that. So what happened is that the third engine somehow fall off. And then when it pops off, it catches the fourth engine and then push it off as well. And thanks to airplane physics, it will not stabilize correctly, and then you have to do that as best as possible. Good thing they fall in the water though, but apparently they should have turned off those two engines as well, because with their power they will force the plane to continue losing their level and then causing it to go wrong. Oh, this is the incident where it hits the apartment building. Oh, I get it now. Number 3. Oh yes, I know this. China Airlines flight 611. While trying to cruise around some sort of, I don't know how high it is. Okay, so 611 used to have a tail strike back in the day, and then 22 years later, the disaster strikes, and it's because of poor maintenance. What then happened is that the tail broke off, clean off, and due to the loss of cabin pressure, small pieces broke, including the cab, and then splashes into the water. Plus, there was a scene where a safety car landed in the middle of nowhere with a young man noticing it. Okay, flight 6 of USPS. No, UPS, not USPS. What happened is that while landing, some batteries that they are carrying went into flames. They then lost control, trying to make an emergency landing somewhere in the UAE, and then they crash. Oh, this is it! Oh snap! Oh snap! It's goddamn 2020 mode. Here he comes! So what Pan Am is trying to do is trying to completely move out of the way. It was too late, and KLM decided to do something. So, and they ended up doing a tail strike and then hitting the Pan Am. Yes. But how can we mention a air crash of a 747 without mentioning where I come from. Once again, yes, I come from Singapore. Without that's right, I'm talking about Flight 6. Now again, this is not any sort of stuff. But then this is one of the only disasters that happened with Singapore Airlines. That has a plane crash with broken pieces. Apart from another aircraft who have a bad tail strike when it took off. Surprisingly. Mayday! Caution with the wind! To the wind! I know. I like Mayday nowadays. This is a true story. It's based on official reports and eyewitness accounts.
I remember that it was very windy.
As a typhoon bears down on Taiwan, the 747 hurtled down the runway at Chiang Kai-shek Airport.
V1.
V1.
Your chances of being in an airplane crash are vanishingly small.
At a certain time, the plane kind of lost it.
On October the 31st, 2000, 159 passengers could not beat the odds.
The midsection people, they were killed by the fire and smoke.
Many are left wondering,
I was in the rear section of the aircraft.
could the key to surviving a plane crash be a matter of choosing the right seat?
Run as far away as you can!
I'm not going to censor this. The people has to learn. Mayday! Air disasters. What? That's it? Just kidding! While we are mentioning Flight 6 from Singapore Airlines, I forgot that there is another darkest time for Singapore Airlines. You know what it is? It's Flight 11. 11? 11? No mentions. Alright, I'm not going to tell you what that is. No. But I can do a tag. Wait, there's Among Us! Anyway. Let's... No, there's no Among Us. But then 9 years ago, they did that awkward video featuring Mario. Nice. Oh, disaster breakdown. Nice. Perfect.
This is how fast YouTube is with Brave. Notice how there's no pre-roll ads?
Subscribe if you want me to react to ads whenever they pop
Chrome
up.
was great in 2008, but it's 2021.
The modern-day airport is designed with designated spaces for different aircraft operations, spaces for planes to board passengers and load cargo, spaces for ground operations, and obviously, a significant amount of airport space is reserved for flight operations, takeoff and landing, the runway. In a catastrophic case of human error on October 31st, 2000, a large passenger plane would crash at Taipei in Taiwan on the ground, killing 83 people. A Boeing 747 collided with ground objects on takeoff. But why did this happen? Why did Singapore Airlines Flight 6 take off on a runway that was not clear?
By the way, this picture is the nose of the plane. So I won't say that the whole ends, both ends are kind of alright. Only the tail, even though the tail is burnt, one of the both elevators are kind of cut off, and the whole stern of the fuselage is cut off. So.
It was the evening of October 31st, 2000. Singapore Airlines Flight 6 had taken off from Singapore, Southeast Asia, on a flight to Los Angeles. It is one of the longest routes at Singapore Airlines, and as such, there was a scheduled stopover in Taipei in Taiwan. Chiang Kai-shek Airport is located west of Taipei and is one of the largest and busiest airports in Asia. Singapore Airlines Flight 6 would arrive here in the late evening that day. The plane was a Boeing 747-400, the then latest model of the iconic plane. This particular plane rolled off of the Boeing production line in early 1997, being the 1,099th plane built of the type. It was just one of two planes in the Singapore Airlines fleet to be painted in a colorful tropical livery designed to promote the airline's first and business class products. On the flight deck of Flight 6 was a crew of 3. The more modern cockpit of the 747-400 model had eliminated the role of the flight engineer, as was needed on the previous models. Despite this, there were still 3 pilots on the flight deck. 41-year-old Captain Fung Chi Kong up till this point had accumulated over 11,000 flight hours, with over 2,000 of those in the 747. He was accompanied on the flight deck by the first officer, 36-year-old Latif Serrano, a much less experienced pilot with just 552 hours logged in the plane. When it comes to hours in the 747, the relief pilot, 38-year-old Nung Keng Leng, had logged the most hours with 4,500. He also had logged over 5,500 hours in total. All pilots had a good relationship with their airline, with records indicating no disciplinary problems. In the cabin were a further 17 crew members. Over the past week, a Category 2 typhoon had been making its way through this region of East Asia. Typhoon Zhangsen had formed 1 week prior to the Singapore Airlines Flight 6 incident. Originating on the west side of the Pacific Ocean, the storm passed over the Philippines before making its way north, passing over Taiwan and subsequently Taipei and Chiang Kai-shek Airport towards the end of the typhoon's life. It would dissipate the day after on November 1st. Having arrived in Taipei in the late evening on October 31st, weather begins to slowly deteriorate as the oncoming storm approaches, the center of the storm of which was roughly 360 miles south of the airport. Winds taken from the storm indicated wind speeds of 75 knots gusting up to 90. Visibility at the airport, however, was less than 1 kilometer. The plane was parked on stand Bravo 5 on the south side of the airport, where the flight crew reported for duty at 9:53 p.m. local time. Winds here were also quite strong. According to the accident report, weather observations taken at 10:40 p.m. measured a wind speed of 38 knots gusting up to 58. In preparing for departure, the flight crew would have read the dispatch notes provided to them, which would have contained crucial information pertaining to the flight ahead. In these dispatch notes, a notice to airmen on NOTAM stated that runway 5 right was partially closed for construction work. The airport at Taipei at the time consisted of 3 runways. There was a singular runway on the south side of the airport, marked runway 06 and 24 at each respective end. Aircraft that evening were making departures to the east, so runway 06 was used but only for departing aircraft. On the north side of the airport, there were a further 2 runways running parallel to one another, marked runway 05 left and right, and runway 23 left and right. Runway 05 right was closed for construction work. When the airport was originally constructed in the 1970s, it was planned to not have 2 twin runways on this side of the airport. Instead, what became runway 05 right was actually supposed to be a parallel taxiway marked as taxiway Alpha. During construction, it was determined that another runway needed to be built in the event that runway 0523 would be closed. Thus taxiway Alpha was repurposed into a runway. Beyond the end of runway 05 right, a cargo terminal was built. Eventually, this runway was to be repaired and repurposed again back into a taxiway. By the time that the accident flight in question occurred, the remaining section of the runway was used for taxi operations, but not takeoff and landing. At 10:57 p.m., the flight crew of Singapore Airlines Flight 6 contacted clearance delivery at Taipei Airport. Over the next several minutes, the flight crew would come into contact with multiple air traffic controllers. Once ATC clearance was given, the flight crew tuned into the ATIS, Automated Terminal Information Service, where they received Information Tango, which also highlighted the runway situation at the airport. Also highlighted was weather information with runway visibility of just 450 meters. Winds were now 35 knots, gusting 52. Pushback from Gate Bravo 5 started at around 11 p.m., with taxi clearance being requested at 11:05. It was here that the ground controller began giving the flight crew a set of taxi instructions. In the controller's transmission, they initially said to taxi to runway 06, before they quickly corrected themselves to giving clearance for Flight 6 to taxi to runway 05 left. Singapore 6, taxi to runway 06 via taxiway, correction, runway 05 left via taxiway Sierra Sierra, West Cross, and November Papa. According to the accident report, it had become clear that the flight crew were unsure of the taxi clearance that they had just been given. The first officer going on record saying that he missed that transmission. The captain, however, read back the clearance to the controller. The flight crew would then take some time to discuss the route to this runway from their current ground position. Being on the south side of the airport, the taxi onto runway 05 left is a relatively long one. Looking back at the controller's taxi instructions, we can see the route that they wanted Flight 6 to take. Flight 6 needed a taxi along taxiway Sierra Sierra. West Cross refers to a taxiway on the southwest side of the airport, which joins the two almost symmetrical sides of the airport together. After the West Cross, Flight 6 would enter taxiway November Papa, traversing parallel to the end of the set of twin runways. Not noted in the controller's clearance was the need to cross runway 05 right to eventually enter runway 05 left on the far side. Captain Fung Chi Kong was the one at the controls managing the taxi and takeoff on this flight, and even acknowledged to the controller of the need to depart on runway 05 left. Because of the rather adverse weather conditions, the flight crew commented on the strong winds and were concerned of potential skidding. As a result, the flight crew taxied the plane slowly to the end of the runway. With the time now being 11:11 p.m., Singapore Airlines Flight 6 had now made it onto and taxiing down taxiway November Papa. The ground controller hands the crew off to the tower at 11:12. 2 minutes later at 11:14, the crew were making note of which taxiway to turn onto before turning onto the runway. With such low visibility, the controllers in the control tower could not see the plane from their vantage point. Many airlines in Southeast Asia, including Singapore Airlines, often take off in poor weather conditions. At this far end of the airport, there are multiple taxiways on and off the runway. The taxiway that Singapore Airlines Flight 6 was to take onto runway 05 left was November 1. At 11:14, the instruction for taxiing into position and hold was given, followed by the takeoff clearance, despite the plane at this point only just approaching the end of the taxiway. The flight crew was supposed to taxi the plane over the closed for flight operations runway 05 right. However, on this night, Singapore Airlines Flight 6 did not cross the runway, instead turning early, lining up with runway 05 right instead of 05 left, which was where the plane was supposed to be. Halfway down runway 05 right was multiple sets of construction equipment including excavators, bulldozers, rollers, concrete barriers, and multiple miscellaneous machinery, which had been left overnight to wait out the typhoon before work resumed. The measured runway visibility of less than half a kilometer meant that the flight crew of the accident flight could not see the equipment obstructing their runway. The controllers in the tower can also not see the plane is lined up for takeoff on the wrong runway. The time was now 11:16, when the 4 engines on the Boeing 747 were powered up. For the next 30 seconds, the takeoff roll would appear to be normal. 10 seconds into the takeoff roll, the standard 80-knot call-out was made by the first officer. In a single moment at 11:17 and 16 seconds, the captain saw the ground obstructions on the runway come into view for a brief moment, exclaiming, "Something's there." Just 1 second later, the cockpit voice recorder records, the first impact with the ground objects. Flight 6 collided with multiple concrete barriers on the runway before colliding with multiple pieces of machinery. By the time that the flight data recorder went silent, the recorded speed around this time was a ground speed of 131 knots. A crane located on the ground tore away the left wing, which caused the midsection of the plane to burst into flames. Subsequently, most fatalities in this accident came from the plane's midsection, but many who perished were seated above the center fuel tanks. The fuselage broke into two, separating around the galley which separates the rear cabin to that which lays in the midsection. Immediately following the crash on the runway, air traffic controllers hailed emergency services to the site. Over 40 firefighting vehicles and 58 ambulances arrived on the scene, along with over 400 personnel. It took firefighters around 10 minutes to control the fire. The accident claimed the lives of 83 people. A further 71 suffered injuries ranging from minor to severe. A total of 96 people survived. The 3 members of the flight crew all survived. First Officer Latif Serrano escaped with minor injuries. Pilot error was ruled to be a major contributor to the accident. Singapore Airlines initially denied claims that the pilots took off from the wrong runway, and even denied that there were fatalities. The company later retracted these statements once it was proven without question that this was indeed the case. The Taiwanese Aviation Safety Council determined that the flight crew did not appropriately review their taxi routing, as all relevant charts and information was available to the pilots. Their conclusion also highlighted that the pilots did not appropriately cross-check that the plane was on the correct runway by observing the primary flight displays, which on the 747-400 can be done on the navigation display screen. The findings of the Taiwanese authorities proved to be controversial in Singapore. Singaporean officials highlighted that the airport lighting and markings were not of an adequate standard. Technology to display ground movements of aircraft at an airport was not installed at Taipei. Many modern airliners in the modern day now come equipped with a runway awareness system, which gives audible readouts to pilots to indicate which runway they are on. This technology also works for approaching a runway for landing. The accident plane's sister aircraft soon had its promotional livery removed. The crash of Singapore Airlines Flight 6